Welcome. This is Cheating Tale Stories. Tell me where you're watching from in the comments, because what I'm about to share with you will make you question everything you think you know about the people closest to you. This story starts with something as innocent as a baby bracelet, but it ends with revelations that will shake you to your core. My name is David, and for 37 years of my life, I thought I knew my story. I thought I knew my family, my past, my wife. I was wrong about all of it. It started 3 months ago when my wife, Celeste, was in the hospital for what should have been routine gallbladder surgery. She'd been having pain for weeks, and finally, her doctor scheduled the procedure. I took time off work to be there with her, to drive her home, to take care of her during recovery. That's what husbands do, right? The surgery went well, and while Celeste was still groggy from anesthesia, I was gathering her things from the hospital room. Her purse, her phone charger, the book she'd brought but never opened. That's when I found it. At the bottom of her purse, tangled up with old receipts and loose change, was a tiny plastic bracelet, the kind they put on newborns in hospitals. It was yellowed with age, clearly decades old, and so small it could have fit around my thumb. I almost threw it away with the trash from her purse. Almost. But something made me look closer. Maybe it was the way the light hit it. Or maybe it was just curiosity. But I turned that little bracelet over in my hands, and that's when I saw the name printed on it. David Chen. My name. My exact name. But here's the thing that made my blood run cold. Celeste and I never had children. We'd been married for 15 years, and we'd never even tried to have kids. She'd always said she wasn't ready, and I'd respected that. We'd talked about it occasionally over the years, but it never happened. So why did my wife have a baby bracelet with my name on it, hidden in the bottom of her purse? I stood there in that sterile hospital room, holding this tiny piece of plastic, and I felt like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. Celeste was still sleeping, the beeping of machines filling the silence, and I had about 1,000 questions racing through my mind. The bracelet was old, really old. The plastic had that yellowed look that things get after 20, maybe 30 years. The printing was faded but still legible. David Chen. Born March 15th, 1987. 1. I was born in 1987. March 15th. That's my birthday. I slipped the bracelet into my pocket and didn't say anything to Celeste when she woke up. I drove her home, helped her to bed, made her soup, did all the things a caring husband should do. But that whole time, that little bracelet felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket. That night, after Celeste had taken her pain medication and fallen asleep, I sat in our kitchen with that bracelet under the bright overhead light, examining every detail. The hospital name was partially worn away, but I could make out St. Mary's Medical Center. There was a patient number, barely visible, and those dates. March 15th, 1987. My birthday. I'd been born at St. Mary's Medical Center on March 15th, 1987. My parents had told me that story countless times. My mother had always said it was an easy birth, that I came right on schedule, that my father had cried when he first held me. But if this was my hospital bracelet from when I was born, how did Celeste have it? And why had she kept it hidden all these years? The next morning, I called in sick to work. Celeste was still recovering, sleeping most of the day, so I had time to think. I kept turning possibilities over in my mind, but none of them made sense. Maybe she'd gotten it from my mother somehow. My parents had died in a car accident 8 years ago, and we'd cleaned out their house together. Maybe Celeste had kept some sentimental items without telling me, but that didn't feel right. My mother had been. Let's just say she'd never been Celeste's biggest fan. They were polite to each other, but there was always tension there. The idea that my mother would have given Celeste something so personal, or that Celeste would have wanted to keep it, seemed unlikely. I decided to start with what I could verify. I drove to St. Mary's Medical Center and went to the records department. The woman behind the counter was helpful but cautious about privacy laws. I explained that I was trying to access my own birth records, showed my ID, filled out some forms. 2 hours later, I had a copy of my birth certificate and my newborn medical records. Everything matched what I had always known. David Chen, born March 15th, 1987. at 3:42 a.m. Parents listed as Michael and Linda Chen. Normal birth weight. No complications. But there was something else in the file that I'd never seen before. A note from a social worker, dated 3 days after my birth. It was brief, almost cryptic. Baby released to adoptive parents as planned. Birth mother recovering well. All documentation sealed per court order. Adoptive parents. I read that line probably 20 times, sitting in my car in the hospital parking lot. Adoptive parents. But my parents were Michael and Linda Chen. They'd raised me from birth. They'd shown me baby pictures, told me stories about bringing me home from the hospital, unless they weren't my biological parents, unless I'd been adopted, and somehow, no one had ever told me. But that still didn't explain how Celeste had my hospital bracelet. I drove home in a daze, my mind spinning with questions I didn't know how to ask. Celeste was awake when I got there, sitting up in bed with her laptop, catching up on work emails despite my protests that she should be resting. "How are you feeling?" I asked, sitting on the edge of the bed, that bracelet still in my pocket. "Better," she said, not looking up from her screen. "The pain's not as bad today. Did you go somewhere? You were gone for a while." "Just ran some errands," I said. I wanted to ask her about the bracelet, but something held me back. Maybe it was fear of what the answer might be. That evening, I called my Uncle Robert, my father's brother. He was the only family I had left, and if anyone would know about my adoption, it would be him. "Uncle Robert," I said when he answered, "I have a question about when I was born. Did Mom and Dad ever mention anything about adoption?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Too long. "David," he said finally, his voice careful, "why are you asking about this now?" "So it's true." My heart was pounding. I was adopted. Another pause. "Your parents. They wanted to tell you when you were older. But then years went by, and it just became easier to. Well, you were their son in every way that mattered. They loved you like you were their biological child." I felt like I was floating outside my body. Listening to this conversation happen to someone else. Who were my birth parents? "I don't know much," Robert said. "It was a private adoption, arranged through the hospital. A young girl, maybe 16 or 17. She couldn't keep the baby. Your parents had been trying for years to have children, and this seemed like a miracle." "What was her name?" "I'm sorry, David. I never knew. Your parents respected her privacy. They said it was better that way, for everyone involved." After I hung up, I sat in my home office, staring at that tiny bracelet. A 16 or 17-year-old girl had given birth to me and given me up for adoption. The parents I'd loved and mourned had never been my biological parents, and I'd lived 37 years without knowing the truth. But I still didn't understand how Celeste fit into this puzzle. Over the next few days, as Celeste recovered, I found myself watching her differently, looking for signs, for tells, for anything that might explain how she'd come to have that bracelet. She seemed normal, focused on getting better, complaining about being stuck in bed, asking me to bring her tea and adjust her pillows. But sometimes I'd catch her looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, like she was studying my face, memorizing it. A week after I'd found the bracelet, I made a decision. I waited until Celeste was napping, and then I went to our bedroom and searched through her things. I felt terrible about it, violated her privacy in a way I'd never done before, but I needed answers. In the back of her closet, behind a stack of old photo albums, I found a manila envelope. It was thick, stuffed with papers, and when I opened it, my hand started shaking. Birth certificates, hospital records, court documents, and at the very bottom, a letter written in a teenage girl's handwriting, dated March 20th, 1987, 5 days after I was born. The letter started, "To my baby boy, David." I had to sit down on the bedroom floor as I read it. The letter was from my birth mother, written to me but never sent. In it, she explained that she was 17 years old, unmarried, and couldn't provide the life I deserved. She wrote about how much she already loved me, even though she'd only held me for a few minutes after I was born. She wrote about how she hoped my new family would tell me about her someday, when I was old enough to understand. She signed it all my love, Celeste. Celeste. My wife's name. But that was impossible. Celeste was 39 years old. In 1987, she would have been. I did the math quickly in my head. She would have been 14, not 17. Unless. I looked at the birth certificate more closely. The birth mother's name was listed as Celeste Maria Santos. Date of birth, March 3, 1970. If she was born in 1970, she would have been 17 when I was born. She would be 55 now, not 39. My wife Celeste had always said she was 39. We'd celebrated her 39th birthday 6 months ago. I'd never seen her driver's license up close. Never had reason to question her age. But if this birth certificate was real, I heard footsteps in the hallway and quickly stuffed everything back into the envelope. Celeste appeared in the bedroom doorway, looking groggy from her nap. "What are you doing in here?" she asked. "Just looking for my phone charger," I lied, standing up quickly. She nodded, but her eyes went to the closet, then back to my face. "Did you find it?" "Yeah, it was on your nightstand." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay next to Celeste, listening to her breathe, and tried to process what I had discovered. If the documents were real, if that letter was genuine, then my wife was actually my biological mother. The woman I'd been married to for 15 years. The woman I'd shared a bed with. The woman I loved. Was the teenage girl who'd given birth to me 37 years ago. It was impossible. It was sick. It was starting to make horrible sense. The way Celeste had always been reluctant to have children. The way she sometimes looked at me like she was memorizing my face. The way she'd never wanted to talk about her family, her past, her childhood. She'd always said her parents were dead. That she didn't have any siblings. That she preferred to focus on the future rather than dwell on the past. The age discrepancy explained so much. She looked incredible for 55. But I'd attributed that to good genes and expensive skincare. She was mature in ways I'd always admired. But I'd thought that was just her personality. How long had she known who I was? Had she sought me out deliberately? Had our entire relationship been based on this lie? The questions kept me awake until dawn. The next day, I took another sick day and went back to St. Mary's Medical Center. This time, I asked to speak with someone about adoption records from 1987. After several hours and multiple phone calls, I was connected with a social worker who specialized in adoption reunification. "I can't give you sealed records," she explained, "but I can facilitate contact if both parties consent to it. Do you have reason to believe your birth mother might want to reconnect?" I thought about Celeste sleeping in our bed, about the envelope hidden in her closet, about 15 years of marriage built on the most fundamental lie imaginable. "I think she already has," I said. That afternoon, I confronted her. I waited until she was feeling better, sitting up in the living room with a cup of tea, reading a book. I sat down across from her with the envelope in my hands. "Celeste," I said, "we need to talk." She looked up, saw the envelope, and her face went completely white. "Where did you get that?" "From your closet," I said. "The question is, where did you get this hospital bracelet?" I pulled the tiny bracelet out of my pocket and set it on the coffee table between us. Celeste stared at it like it was a snake. "How long have you known?" I asked. She was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "Since before I met you." The words hit me like a physical blow. "You knew who I was when we first met." She nodded, tears starting to fall down her cheeks. "I'd been looking for you for years. I hired a private investigator when you turned 18. But your adoption was sealed. It took almost 15 more years to find you. So our entire relationship, our marriage, it's all been a lie." "No," she said quickly. "David, please, let me explain. It started as, I just wanted to see you, to know that you were okay. I never intended for it to go this far." "This far?" I stood up, pacing away from her. "Celeste, you married me. You've been sleeping with me for 15 years. Do you understand how twisted this is?" "I know how it looks," she said, crying harder now. "But David, I gave birth to you when I was 17 years old. I was practically a child myself. I held you for 5 minutes before they took you away. For 32 years, I wondered about you every single day. I wondered if you were happy, if you were healthy, if your adoptive parents were good to you. So you decided to become my wife. I decided to get to know you, she said. I got a job at your company. I started eating lunch at the same cafe you did. I just wanted to see what kind of man you'd become. But then we started talking, and you were so kind, so funny, you were everything I'd hoped you would be. I felt sick. When did you decide to seduce me? It wasn't like that. She wiped her eyes. David, I fell in love with you. Not as your mother, but as a woman. I know that sounds impossible, but I gave you up when you were 3 days old. I never raised you. I never knew you as my child. When I met you, you were just this amazing man who happened to share my DNA. You lied about your age. You lied about your past. You lied about everything. I knew you'd never understand if you knew the truth. And honestly, I thought maybe it would be better if you never found out. We were happy, weren't we? We had a good marriage. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. A good marriage? Celeste, you're my biological mother. Do you have any idea how messed up this is? Biologically, yes, she said. But David, I never mothered you. I never changed your diapers or helped you with homework or scared away monsters under your bed. Michael and Linda Chen were your parents in every way that mattered. I was just the woman who carried you for 9 months, and then gave you to people who could love you better than I could. I stared at her, this woman I'd shared my life with, and I didn't recognize her anymore. How can you rationalize this? How can you sit there and act like this is normal? Because I love you, she said simply. I loved you when you were growing inside me, and I loved you when I had to give you away, and I love you now. Maybe it's not the kind of love society says is acceptable, but it's real. And for 15 years, we were happy. Were we? Or was I just living in some sick fantasy you created? She flinched like I'd slap her. It wasn't a fantasy, David. Our feelings were real. Our life together was real. I sat back down, my head in my hands. I don't even know who I am anymore. I don't know what's real and what's not. The parents I loved weren't my real parents. The wife I married is my biological mother. Everything I thought I knew about my life is a lie. Your parents were real, Celeste said softly. They loved you. They raised you to be an incredible man. That's real. But you took that choice away from me. You took away my right to know the truth about my past. You took away my right to decide whether I wanted to have a relationship with my birth mother. You stole that from me. She nodded, more tears falling. I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. We sat in silence for a while. Finally, I asked the question I was afraid to hear the answer to. Did you ever plan to tell me? I don't know, she said honestly. There were moments when I almost did. When you talked about wanting to find your birth parents. When you wondered about your medical history. But I was scared. I was scared you hate me. I was scared you'd leave. I'm leaving now. The words came out before I'd even made the conscious decision to say them. But as soon as they left my mouth, I knew they were true. David, please. I can't stay here, Celeste. I can't look at you and not think about. I can't do this. Where will you go? I don't know. A hotel. My friend Mark's place. I need time to think. I stood up and headed toward the bedroom to pack a bag. Celeste followed me. David, please don't go. We can work through this. We can go to counseling. We can. Counseling. I turned to face her. Celeste, what counselor is going to know how to deal with this situation? What kind of therapy exists for a man who finds out he's been married to his biological mother for 15 years? We'll figure it out together. Together? I laughed bitterly. There is no together anymore. There can't be. Do you understand that? What we had. It's over. It has to be over. Why? Because of biology? Because of DNA? David, We are the same people we were yesterday. We love each other the same way. No, I said, stuffing clothes into a suitcase. We are not the same people. Yesterday, I thought I was married to a woman named Celeste who was 39 years old and had no family. Today, I find out I'm married to a 55-year-old woman who gave birth to me 37 years ago. Everything has changed. But our feelings are irrelevant, I said. This is wrong, Celeste. On every level, it's wrong. Morally, legally, psychologically, it's wrong. I zipped up my suitcase and headed for the door. Celeste grabbed my arm. David, I'm still recovering from surgery. I need you here. I looked down at her hand on my arm. This hand that had held me when I was 3 days old. This hand that had signed papers giving me away. This hand that had worn my wedding ring for 15 years. Call your sister, I said. I don't have a sister. Then call someone. Call a nurse. Call a friend. But don't call me your husband anymore. I pulled free from her grip and walked out of the house we'd shared for 8 years. That was 3 months ago. I've been staying at Mark's place, sleeping on his couch, trying to figure out what comes next. I've seen a therapist, but Celeste was right about one thing. This isn't exactly a situation they teach you about in psychology school. I filed for divorce last month. Celeste didn't contest it. She signed the papers and had them delivered to my lawyer's office. We haven't spoken since the day I left. I've thought about her every day, though. I've wondered if she's okay, if she's healing from her surgery, if she's found someone to help her. I've wondered if she regrets looking for me, if she wishes she'd left the past alone. But mostly, I've wondered about the nature of love itself, because the terrible, confusing truth is that I did love her. For 15 years, I loved her completely. And that love didn't just disappear when I learned the truth about who she was. But love isn't enough, is it? Some lines can't be crossed. Some truths can't be overlooked. Some relationships can't survive the weight of their own impossible foundation. I've started the process of trying to find out more about my biological father. The hospital records mention him briefly, a 17-year-old boy named Miguel who was never told about the pregnancy. Celeste apparently made the decision to give me up without involving him. I'm not sure if I want to find him or not, but I want the option. I want the choice that was taken away from me. I'm also in touch with a support group for people who've discovered unexpected family secrets as adults. It turns out there are more of us than you might think. People who've found out they were adopted. People who've discovered half-siblings they never knew existed. People whose entire family history turned out to be built on lies. None of them had a story quite like mine, but they understood the feeling of having your identity shattered overnight. The hardest part isn't the betrayal, though that cuts deep. The hardest part isn't even the psychological complexity of having loved someone who turns out to be your biological mother. The hardest part is the loneliness. For 15 years, Celeste was my best friend, my confidant, my partner in everything. She was the person I called when I had good news to share. She was the person who held me when my adoptive parents died. She was my anchor, my home base, my safe harbor. And now she's gone. But not because she stopped loving me or because we grew apart or because we wanted different things out of life. She's gone because the fundamental nature of our relationship was impossible. From the very beginning. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if she'd never looked for me. If she'd left the past alone and let me live my life without knowing the truth. Would that have been better? Would ignorance have been kinder? But then I remember that tiny hospital bracelet, hidden in the bottom of her purse for who knows how many years. And I realized she could never have left the past alone. She was carrying it with her every day. This secret that connected us in ways I never understood. I don't know what the future holds. I'm 37 years old, and I feel like I'm starting my life over from scratch. I don't know who I am without the identity I thought I had. I don't know how to trust my own judgment anymore, or how to believe that the people in my life are who they say they are. But I'm trying to rebuild. I'm trying to find a new normal, a new sense of self, a new way to understand love and family and truth. And sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I think about that 17-year-old girl who gave birth to me and then spent 32 years wondering what had become of me. I think about how much she must have loved me to give me away, and how much she must have loved me to find me again. It doesn't make what she did right. It doesn't excuse the lies or the deception or the impossible situation she put us both in. But it helps me understand that love, even twisted love, even impossible love, is still love. The human heart doesn't always follow the rules. Sometimes it leads us places we never intended to go, down paths that society says we shouldn't walk. Sometimes love becomes so complicated that it destroys the very thing it's trying to protect. I may never see Celeste again. I may never speak to her again. But I'll carry this story with me for the rest of my life. This strange and terrible and impossible love story that began with a teenage girl's sacrifice and ended with a tiny hospital bracelet in a purse. Some secrets are too big to keep. Some truths are too heavy to bear. And sometimes, the people we love the most are the ones who hurt us in ways we never saw coming. That's my story. That's how I learned that everything I thought I knew about love and family and truth was wrong. And that's how I'm slowly, painfully, hopefully learning to build something new from the pieces of the life that came before. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever had your world turned upside down by unexpected truth, or if you just want to hear more stories like this one, please subscribe to our channel. And remember, the truth may be painful, but it's always better than living a lie, even when that lie felt like love.